It
But
didn't
you know,
work.
this is like a 7-year-old's concept of how the world should be organized. And you have like these grown people now that are like, we should do this. I'm like, no,
Sometimes
no.
from the mouths of babes. I literally had a similar story with, or there were a couple from my, my kid growing up being like a 5-year-old or 6-year-old, right? And he said to me, this is what he said to me when he was like maybe 6 or 7, and we're talking about taxes, right? And how the government takes money from you in the form of taxes. And he said to me, well, wait, you said the government prints money too. And I'm like, yeah. He's, well, why do they take money from you? Why don't they just print more? And I said, well, they do both.
They get you when you're coming in and when you're coming out.
Well, actually, tell me about where you grew up and how. I want to get into how you started music, but I'd like to know a little bit about your backstory first, about like where you grew up and what influenced you again.
So I grew up in New Jersey. I went to Poland almost every single summer. My mom, she moved to the US and she met my father, who's from Brooklyn. He's Sicilian and Ukrainian, and my mom is from Warsaw. So every summer I would go to Poland, and I feel like that had a really profound influence on a lot of my interests, my love of freedom, my desire to use music to convey a message also was from my mom. She had a great love of the 60s and 70s singer-songwriters. And I also read a lot of dystopian novels. And so I feel like between the music, experiencing the remnants of communism in Poland, and having an interest in like what's going to happen with the world organization, I think that it's a sort of, in a strange way, a natural progression to Bitcoin. I first started hearing about Bitcoin in 2012. I had been singing all around the country for the Ron Paul movement. I learned about Austrian economics, and of course he was my guy. I really thought we could win. Unfortunately, I learned the truth about the political process.
Like Bitcoin, most people are not ready, what you find out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in August of 2012, Stephen Perrin, Tony Galippi from BitPay, they sponsored one of my performances here in Tampa, and they came up to New York. They convinced me that Bitcoin was cool. And so I bought a little bit of Bitcoin at $11. Unfortunately, I didn't have more money. It's a real, kind of like a sore spot for me, because I tried to tell my family and friends and nobody would listen. I'm like, but you guys have money. I'm just a lowly musician. And I gave my whole life savings at the time, which I don't know, was like $500 or something. But, I was all in. And what I noticed about Bitcoin was that even though I knew about the Federal Reserve, even though I knew about Austrian economics, even though I valued freedom, I still didn't really understand Bitcoin. It was a really big leap. Sure. So one of the first ways that I thought that I could contribute to the community was to write the Bitcoin jingle, which ever since is kind of, my signature song whenever I do a crypto event. And I remember still when I was writing that song, I sent it over to a friend of mine. He's like, no, you haven't gone deep enough. This is just superficial. You really need to get to the crux of this. And even though I call it a jingle, there is an element of that where I try and have, kind of just a little bit more of the ethos of why we all like Bitcoin,
Yeah.
And so that was just the beginning of my journey. And so since 2012, I've been a diehard Bitcoiner, using this as a better solution than the political one.
Now tell me a little bit more about, I guess it was your mom who was from Poland, and how that kind of instilled in you this kind of love of freedom. Was it stories that your mom told you, or just her general belief of getting out of there? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So, it's, I'm a kid, right? It's a simple thing. You go to Poland and there was this store called the PKO, and you'd have to get a ticket in order to go into the store. And then you'd have to stand on a really long line, and then you could go in and you could get, Sharby and Larby, because Barbie wasn't even available.
Oh, right.
With all knockoffs. And I mean, it's a really simple thing when you don't have exposure to the same things that you have in the United States. You're like, why is this so horrible? And I was always really concerned about, the fate of humanity. And I still remember distinctly going up to my mom. She was sitting on the couch, and I was like, Mom, listen, why don't we all put some money into a pile, and, people will just take what they need from it, and then everybody will work, and then everybody will share it. And she's like, no, that's communism.
We've tried that already. It's
But
even
you know,
worse.
this is like a 7-year-old's concept of how the world should be organized. And you have like these grown people now that are like, we should do this. I'm like, no,
Sometimes
no.
from the mouths of babes. I literally had a similar story with, or there were a couple from my kid growing up being like a 5-year-old or 6-year-old, right? He's like, and he said to me, this is what he said to me when he was like maybe 6 or 7. And we're talking about taxes, right? And how the government takes money from you in the form of taxes. And he said to me, well, wait, you said the government prints money too. And I'm like, yeah. He's, well, why do they take money from you? Why don't they just print more? And I said, well,
Smart
they do
kid.
both.
They get you when you're coming in and when you're coming out.
It's interesting though. And like but I mean, I've had this kind of same revelation. It's like, you see as a child, if you've seen it yourself and you saw it yourself, where you have the ideal, but then you throw in human nature to the mix, right? And we see what happens. But again, like so many people don't get Bitcoin, so many people don't see that basic fact, right? About the way humans interact when free stuff is given. What happens when free stuff is given?
Yeah,
Right.
well, that's what I think makes economics an interesting thing to study. I mean, it sounds extremely boring. I went to music school. I went to Berkeley in Boston, and they didn't really have much of that. But I did have an international music business course, and we were talking about globalization. And I remember we had to write down like all the great things about globalization. Like there's a whole list of them, but nobody in the room was really able to identify the things that later on became problems. And I think it's just a really great way to get an insight into human nature. If you're a musician, at least I am, very interested in, how people work and how to bring about the best outcome. And so I think economics gives you a much more realistic picture. And I think it's just infinitely interesting.
It is, but for most people, it puts them to sleep, right?
Because they're not learning about it in the right way. I mean, it's the secret to why the world is the way that it is. So I spent a fair amount of time, first I was doing the Liberty stuff, and I'm still, into Liberty stuff. I just don't believe in the political process particularly. But as I was doing Liberty stuff, I also went into the crypto space, and I started doing my own podcast. I haven't done my show in a while, but called the Tatiana Show. And I would have all different subjects. And one of the things that I really loved to talk about was economics and trying to give people a basic understanding. One of the challenging things, I used to manage a number of different recording studios in Manhattan. So I went to Berkeley and Boston, and I started managing recording studios because I wanted free studio time, obviously. So I needed a job. And so and what I noticed was that a lot of artists, they were really clueless when it came to money. Actually, a lot of people are really clueless when it comes to money, but that was always the biggest impact, like the most impactful thing. It wasn't about who was talented. It was about who had cash. You need money in order to record. You need money to buy your followers these days. Like I was so excited when I found out about social media, and I really utilized it. But it took me a few different iterations of different platforms to really figure out that I didn't own my relationships. Every time I went, okay, Friendster, whoops, you do. You got MySpace, you got YouTube. And then I remember in Facebook, like when I was on Facebook and I had my music page, and there was a thing, I could pay 15 cents to show an advertisement. And then if people clicked it, then they would like my page, and then I would always have access to them. But that was not how it worked. That's how I thought it worked. And this just infinitely infuriated me, because they lure you in with the like, and you say, okay, well, I'll pay the 15 cents or whatever it is, because then I could access them all the time. This is totally worthwhile. But that's not how it worked. Then they would make you pay, and then you were not even getting exposure to anybody. And so this suffering between that, and then also, the studio business, watching these really not that talented artists get access to what every artist dreams of, because they were willing to play the game. They were, who you know and who you blow, excuse the expression, but that's how the music industry works, And so I just felt like it was akin to this mafia-like relationship that I had with government and the overlords and the banking system. It was just another extension. And as somebody who loved the music from the 60s and 70s, I listened to Peace Train. That still is the story I talk about today. Like, it's so powerful. And we're all essentially getting robbed, right? You used to have all sorts of anti-war music, right? Now what? All the artists are just like, oh yeah, let's go bomb people. I mean, since when do artists and human beings in general like war? Well, in my opinion, the overlords figured it out. They said, listen, we can't have these kinds of messages. You know, we don't need no like anti-war stuff. We don't need this equality junk. We need everybody to fight. So there's
everybody fighting everybody at all times, right? It's
exactly, but so that's what makes it weird. Is like there's certain types of activism that are more permissible than others, right? And the ones that are divisive and are basically trying to destroy society are considered acceptable, but things that are trying to build up society are for some reason, I don't know. I mean, we live in clown world now. I'm sure your audience knows what that's like. So it's a little bit backwards, but I have this great love of music and the creative process representing the will of the people, the soul of humanity, and having that crush has driven a lot of my innovation in the space for sure.
It's super interesting about social media because I'm heavily invested in social media, have been for, I don't know, 8 years, 9 years. Geez, more like 10 years. We were doing YouTube videos back in like 2010 and stuff. And yeah, you get looped in because at the beginning, every platform at the beginning gave you full access to the people that you connected with, right? And that kind of hooked us in, right, to this idea like, oh my God, I have whatever, even 100 followers, right? But when I send out something, I reach those 100 people who follow me. And that slowly got taken away, but we got addicted to this idea of being able to actually connect with people, which it's super powerful, obviously. But now you see it. I mean, I've had talks in the last couple of days with people on Twitter because, of course, all the Elon stuff happening. But you see, whatever, I don't know, you have 30,000 followers, and you understand very quickly that your reach is actually like maybe 300 people at a time, right? And if you don't create it, and if you're not writing something that is quote unquote viral, right, that people like somehow interface with or react to, it's not going to go anywhere. You're not going to reach even the rest of your 30,000 followers, right? So the carrot they hold before you is, well, you better do something controversial, push the needle, make people feel something. And the easiest way to make people feel something is to make them mad, right? Do that. And then we might push it out to more people. And this kind of algorithmically driven social media that we have right now, I mean, I think we all recognize the terrible nature of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it can't just be something very similar or very simple where it's like, okay, if I have 10 people following me and those people want to receive every piece of content I put out, they tick a box. And then if they don't, they untick the box, right? And then it's algorithmically driven, but nobody seems to want to do that. And I don't understand why that can't happen.
Well, I'm assuming that there's some kind of monetary incentive one way or the other, right?
Oh,
but, COVID has happened and a lot of people I think are struggling because COVID is so miserable. Like everybody got separated and stuff. But for me, it gave me a lot of time to kind of reflect, right? And one of the things that I really liked about the historical NFT Fest was that I feel like it fed a certain part of myself. And this is maybe something people, when they go online, they're always like, oh, I'm so great, I'm so wonderful, blah, blah. But like for me, when I look at my body of work, there are a lot of things that I'm proud of and I think are really like noteworthy. And then there are other places where I don't feel like I get as much support, right? Like I've been stuck at the same effing number of Twitter followers for 4,000 years. And yet then there are other people that have a great success. And it's virtually impossible not to feel bad about yourself when you're exposed to this. I've put in well over 10 years of work into activism. And then there's some random, crypto hoes, excuse me, but like kind of girls that are like, God bless them. We need them. Yep. We need to lure in the boys. But when you see this kind of behavior that's rewarded, that isn't really even based on anything quality, it's really hard to feel decent about yourself. The same thing with the Instagram thing. Like, the artists that I grew up with were able to be sexy without being slutty. And there is a time for being slutty. Don't get me wrong, girls, get your, groove on. but it can't be 24/7 prostitution competition. Like, who's going to be the bigger hoe? Because if you want to just be a normal artist, you first of all, you're depressed. Second of all, you can't get past it, right? Like, boobies are going to win every time, right?
Boobies always win.
Yeah, and so like, it's hard not to fall into that. I think we have a major mental health crisis where you have all these different people that are obsessed with their stupid likes. And it just makes me very angry and very grumpy. The same thing extends to the whole NFT craze, right? I'm very happy we have all these artists coming in. That's awesome. I'm not happy that they're being told that they're going to get rich, because they're not. Sorry, dudes, like, wake up. This is a very early industry. There's like 7 people buying stuff. You're not going to get super famous. You might get to be a part of building something, and then that's like a real thing. But then you've got all these NFT conferences, which are just cash grabs, right? And they've got all these rich guys that are like pay to play. And then you start to feel like what you've done was for naught, you know, especially like some of the ideological reasons why I do crypto, you know, that love of freedom. I think that is not as valued anymore. And so as a result, you know, or look at something like Tokenly. I know, you know, Adam Levine, and Adam has all these tools with Tokenly, and like, we're maybe going to look at turning it into a DAO, and there's a few different options. But like, we were so early. And so I think that a lot of these people that were in early have this feeling of like, we got gypped a little bit. Like, this isn't what we signed up for. It's turning into something very similar to the thing that we're trying to fight. And like, nobody's even necessarily getting credit. Like, where are my accolades? I want people to notice me when I walk in the room, at least somewhat, right? And these are all like ego stupid things. Sure. But like, if you look at music, right? Music isn't the kind of thing, like, if you're a good doctor, you get to the best hospital, you're like chopping up people left and right, you know, you're making the big cash. If you're a good artist, no one cares. It's nothing at all, right? Like, but you are actually able to impact a person's life. And yet you're getting a quarter of a penny for every play on Spotify. And I look at my Spotify numbers and I want to die. I'm like, this is terrible. What am I doing with myself? What is the point of this? And so when I went to Historical NFT Fest, it wasn't shilling. It wasn't like, look at me and my accomplishments. I mean, you know, everybody's got a little bit of that. But for the most part, it was people that were really like-minded and were in it for the right reasons. It was people that, you know, during the bear market or the bull market, they're still there and they're still building and they're still interested. And I just found that to be infinitely fulfilling, because I think, you know, even now after COVID, everybody's going back. We're all supposed to pretend like half of the people didn't want to kill the other half of the people, right? And like, we're supposed to pretend that a bunch of people in power like made a bunch of cash, and there's all this corruption, and now there's all these scary things happening, and we're all just supposed to be like, oh, I can't wait to see what's on TV tonight. Like, no, I'm not doing that. And as a result, I feel like I've become an antisocial, mean grump that doesn't want to do anything. But I'm obviously not like that grumpy, right? Like, I'm cracking jokes. So I felt like that was a little bit of a turning point where I was like, okay, I can be myself. And I don't have to pretend like the world isn't going completely off kilter. And I feel like there's a longer term hope because I'm among family. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think without question, it was the best event that I'd been to in the historic or in the NFT space, period. I mean, without question. But that was simply because it was, you know, one-on-one. The whole thing almost felt like a one-on-one conversation. Right.
Yeah. And it was the number of people. It wasn't too many people. That's another thing. Like, these big conferences, people come to Miami for Bitcoin 2023, whatever, and there's like 50,000 people around. Like, I don't even want to go out. I can't handle all that. It's too loud and there's too much excitement. But those smaller things where, I don't know, like I was just saying this the other day, people don't think of me as shy, but I am a little bit shy. But in those smaller environments, you kind of chit chat, you don't feel as overwhelmed when it's just like a whole big mass of people. And nobody even seems to care about anybody. They're just like, what can I get out of you? What can I get out of you? I'm talking to you, but my eyes are there. I'm looking at who else. And I'll do the same thing, right? Like, I'm not, you know, impervious to this temptation to be overstimulated, but I just really liked it a lot. And I hope that we don't have to wait. I heard that we have to wait 3 years for the next one. I'm like, no. We can't do that. or like an interim, some kind of an interim meeting, maybe like we could do it in Costa Rica. There you go.
Yeah,
Or
absolutely. Well, I think kind of one of my core beliefs is, no matter how crazy the world is, when you deal with people one-on-one, it just changes everything, right? One-on-one, people are 99.9% good. Even though we maybe have all bad in us, we will generally do good things one-on-one. I mean, I've met in person some of my biggest haters online. I mean, people who just awful, scammer, needs to go to jail, like crazy stuff to me online, who I meet in person, and they're like, hey man, nice to meet you, because I mean, dude, you get to talk to people and see people in real life and look them in the eye, right? And it's a different scenario. And I think
that's where we're struggling though, isn't it? Like we are all so connected, but in a lot of ways we're not connected at all. Then you have the existential crisis of like, can you really ever know anyone else but yourself? Like blah, like some other thing. But I think that people want to be connected more than ever. And that's what I find so frustrating. Like, so I'm putting out this new album, and so I started looking at, all these different options that are available for artists now. And I'm looking at, I'm like, all right, it's 10 years into this, and there's still not very good solutions. And it's so frustrating as a person who makes music, like this timing, the end of the world, I was made for this, baby. Like, this is like, prime time Tatiana music. And I feel, and maybe this is like silly, but I feel like my music I'm made on this earth to make music that helps people and that really reaches people. But if you can't get anybody to hear you, you're like, what am I effing doing on this planet? And I have this existential kind of like, why am I here kind of feeling? And then that in turn forces you to have an even deeper expectation from life that isn't like, I want to be famous and people like tell me I'm great. Like, you have to think about, how can I find that peace within myself if I don't have all of those things? Because I think we're going to have a period of time where things are going to get really ugly in mankind. Like, I think we're headed for some rocky times, and all of this previous suffering will be replaced by even worse suffering. So I have to be okay with suffering. And so I'm almost like a little bit on a spiritual journey, like,
well, honestly,
a little Christian action, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, trying to figure out, how do I find a deeper meaning if I'm not getting the connection that I want with people? Like, I don't know how it is that I solve that problem. And therefore I keep banging my head against this crypto wall and trying to work. And that's the point of it, right? Like, the suffering makes us better, and it makes us come up with like better ideas. So I don't know. I think
honestly, what you've just described is kind of another one of these like overall worldview issues that I think is happening. That I look at it as actually a super net positive, but this idea that you, I, and a whole bunch of people now have the time and energy to put into this kind of existential crisis, which used to be reserved for the ultra wealthy, who would then, sail around the world or try to go climb Mount Everest because they actually had enough free time to be able to question their own, like, what am I doing here? Have that, what am I doing here moment. Trust me, your great grandfather working in the fields did not have time to question that, right? Because he was working so hard, grinding out, just trying to survive. It's kind of like, because of the benefit of this modern day society, like, so many more people are bumping up against this, right? And so how we navigate it, it's like one of the most terrifying things you can bump up against, because what am I here for, right? I've worked my entire adult life as a professional musician, and I don't feel like I'm making an impact. Holy cow. Trust me, I've had this multiple times in my life already. I've been very fortunate to have free time where I could actually have these questions, but it looks you straight in the face and it's terrifying. And,
but then think about how silly these problems are in comparison to people that are actually suffering. You know what I mean? Like, actually going through it, like people who are having to run away from their homes in the Ukraine, Russian guys, their government's like, you got to go fight. They're like, I didn't do anything. I mean, like, the amount of suffering in the world. And what I find, unfortunately, is that the world is there's so much infinite beauty in the world, but there's also an extraordinary amount of evil. I mean, really, really evil stuff. Like my friend, his parents were murdered, and it was so devastating for all of us in his friend circle, of course, the most for him and his family, but it was just a shocker to me that people could actually be murdered. Yeah, you see it, you watch your stupid TV shows, you see about it in the news, but then you have this example of pure evil in front of you, confronting you.
Yeah.
And you have to make peace with the fact that you're not going to be able to save every person. And that goes back to music. Like, that's why I want to make music, because I feel like I have a salve. I have suffering within myself. I translate it into a song and I alleviate other people's suffering. But you're never going to be able to help everybody. And you have to just be okay with that. And in fact, you know, some people's suffering is part of their lesson. And that's really hard not to want to try and fix every problem, you know? And I think it's good for us to want to fix every problem. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily lead to the most social stuff. And like, you know, I actually haven't been writing. I think I need to start writing again. Like, I've been focusing on this record. It's, you know, Love Songs for Idiots is a very, you know, like, okay, let's do some emotional healing from relationships, kind of poking fun at the utterly impossible task of dating these days, right? But
it seems like it would be easy. I don't know. This is like somebody who hasn't dated in 30 years, but it seems like it would be great right now. But I don't know. Maybe I'm fooling.
No, it would be terrible. First of all, we're not going down that path.
Let's not go down that road.
There's no fun to be had in the single life. Like, the online dating is terrifying. People are just around miserable. So
tell me about, we skipped over how you got into music though when you were a kid. How you got into it?
Well, I always knew. Since I was a little girl, I've always wanted to be a singer or, you know, a performer of some kind. I learned early on that actors are annoying. So I was like, I'm not going to do this. This is kind of vain and silly. I like acting, you know, it's fun or whatever. I like movies and things like that. But I think music is a lot more deep. And so I still remember 6th grade was the first year where they had a musical, and I went in and I sang, it was The Wizard of Oz, and I sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and I left the room and everybody's like, oh, who is that? Who is that? I was like, oh my God, it must have been terrible. Like, I didn't even think for a minute that it went well. And I still remember going up to that piece of paper and seeing my name for Dorothy and being like, wow. And so I was in love with the stage ever since. I did, you know, music lessons and stuff like that. And unfortunately, in high school, I didn't get to be in a cool kid band. You know, I was just in like choir and plays and stuff. But my guy friends, they didn't want to play with me. They wanted to be cool and wearing like, you know, grungy outfits together, and I wasn't grunge enough. And then I went on to Berklee College of Music, where I studied jazz vocal performance and music business. But again, all I really want to do is music, but unfortunately I have this business side, and there's this whole like bills thing that keeps coming up. So yeah, I had to do a little mix of those two.
Tell me what, so this is kind of something I've been wanting to ask like a professional musician for a while. I don't know. I was listening. I heard some Paul McCartney before we came on the podcast, and I was just thinking about him, and I'm like, you know, I mean, universally regarded as a musical genius, right? Tons of hits, you know, 50 of his songs. I know a bunch of, you know, everybody knows his songs. But then you look, and I was scrolling through an album he had, and you know, the album's 10 songs long, and I knew one song of those 10, right? And I'm like, well, what place does just volume have? Because he's done hundreds or thousands of songs, right? And we all know maybe 20 of them, right? Or 30 maybe. I mean, and he's a super hit maker, right? And you hear about like one hit wonders and stuff. It's not like one hit wonders made one song, you know, they made hundreds of songs. What's the place for kind of this idea of like volume for an artist? What's your view on that?
Well, I think a writer writes because they have to, first and foremost, right? Like, I could sit around and complain and be like, why am I even putting out this album? It's like, because you must, and you have to, right? So if you're writing a lot of songs, you know, that's fine. But I don't think that, I mean, there are certain songs where it's like you could just tell it's a hit, right? And then there's certain song formats that people stick to that are the formula for, you know, what a pop song should be and stuff like that. But I mean, there's kingmakers. That's all, in my opinion, it is. I don't think that a majority of music is really based on it. Not to say that there aren't good songs, because there's tons of great, you know, rock stars, right? And not everybody has the same amount of talent. But I think it's really just a matter of selection, right? Like, is Taylor Swift that great? I mean, yeah, she's a good songwriter, you know, like her songs are cute. She also has amazing people at her beck and call that are just there ready to help her, right? She's no better than, I don't know, a large portion of the girls that are out there, right? You know, that was always a frustrating point, was when I first started doing music, like, you need your niche. I'm like, my niche, I'm a chick with a guitar. I'm sorry. Like, there's a lot of us. That's what we do. We just sing, and, you know, maybe there's some love songs, some tears. Like, what do you want from me? Luckily, because I did my Liberty stuff and my Bitcoin stuff, that was my niche. But like, how do you even cut through as an independent artist? And how do you survive until you are sustainable, right? And the only answers that I have are extraordinary amount of luck, which unfortunately artists are very optimistic and they're always hoping that luck will be there for them. I mean, that's how Berklee College of Music charges. I heard it's $300,000 for freaking education, so they could go and make $10 an hour because they're taking right? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's actually
how many hits are coming out of Berklee College of Music?
Oh, Berklee's a great school. Like, it's, you know, I have a love-hate relationship with it, but I feel like, you know, you can really get by at Berklee if you're not paying attention, because they want that money, right? And they're basically trying to teach people how to have a sustainable career in music. But like, if you want to be a performing artist, well, I hope you like wedding gigs. You know, like that's how it is, right? Like, or you have really rich parents and then they support you for the first 5 years, or I mean, I don't know, maybe a rich boyfriend or something, or yeah, those are my options. Get a rich boyfriend, get rich parents, get somebody else that's rich that will, like, you know, give you money, or be extremely lucky. But I feel like talent
or be like a world
class,
class, like one in a billion talent, right? I mean, you could be a 1 in a billion talent, but I mean, that's rare, right? I mean,
but can you be like, yeah, I mean, not everybody.
I'm guessing. That's my feeling. But
well, like, okay, so you look at people that are famous right now. Okay, Cardi B, Megan Thee Stallion, Rihanna, Beyonce, I'll leave off the list because I actually think she's quite talented. But like, you've got these people that are basically super hoes. Like, they're not a wonderful talent that like, did we all need the WAP song? Like, I don't think that the world was missing something when we didn't hear about the macaroni.
Apparently, yes, we did.
Okay. Like, she's got to go see a doctor. Anyway, but she's like, that's not the best that the world has to offer, you know? I told this story like once before, but it just really left an impression on me. When I was in Poland, I went to karaoke and I really wanted to sing. And this woman is, you know, I do my karaoke song. I'm feeling like, oh yeah, I'm good. These people suck. Like, not even like out loud, but you know, I'm thinking I'm hot shit. And so this lady goes up, the owner of the karaoke, and she goes up and she sings this Annie Lennox song. And it's, I think it's like love song to a vampire or something. I had never heard this song. I was crying in the audience. It was so heartbreaking and beautiful, this rendition. I heard the Annie Lennox song later. I'm like, Annie Lennox ain't got nothing on
She crushed Annie Lennox.
She crushed it. And it was such a deep and such a serious song. And people need deep and serious songs. They don't need only WAP all day, every day. Like, you can't just feed the soul off of that. And she was just so good. And instead, you know, afterward, I buttered her up because she didn't like me. I don't think she liked me, but I buttered her up and I'm like, so, you know, do you have a website or anything? And she's like, well, you know, I've been meaning to get this website and, you know, I didn't get it. And it crushes me. Like, she has to be like the highlight of her life is being able to sing. Maybe this is actually presumptuous. Maybe she has other things that she values more, and I'm putting my thing. But, you know, like the main thing that she lives for is that one moment on the stage where people can listen to her, and she has that time. And that's being robbed of her. And why? Because other people are so freaking fantastic and she's so crappy. That's not why. And that's why I kind of opened this discussion with that feeling of acknowledging the terrible torture and weight an artist has to not be seen and to not be heard and to not be recognized, and to be working in a framework where it's rigged. You know, it's the same thing like working in like trying to make it ahead, like on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. Like, you're not going to be able to win that game unless you're in the right thing. And that's not based on your own talent. That's based on something outside of your control. And so that brings me back to why we need these kinds of tools, like Web3 tools, right? I didn't even know, I guess I'm in Web3 now. I was like, I don't know. I thought we were just trying to figure out a direct way with artists to get to fans. And I think that that's really the best way to create sustainable careers, is to have, you know, the 1,000 fans that'll give you $100 a year. And now you're making $100 grand a year, and you could feed yourself and the kid for that, you know. Maybe you're not going to live the best life, but like, that's decent, right? That's actual money where you don't have to like not afford to go get out to dinner once a week or something, right? So that's really what I'd like to see, is like less people feeling like their purpose on earth isn't being fulfilled. And I think that my suffering around that hopefully has some kind of a purpose for others, right? Because then I could be the representative voice. If I wasn't suffering, then I wouldn't care about them, and I would just go around, you know, bling bling.
Bling bling. Well, I do think you guys maybe, it's so funny, like when I've talked to Adam and, you know, people about what he was building back then and what you guys were doing back then, and with Tokenly and all this sort of stuff, it's like, well, you know, maybe it just was, you know, maybe 10 years too early, right? And nobody has it figured out now, but the idea still feels really, really solid. And I've seen a couple of artists, you know, doing NFTs successfully, certainly some musical artists doing NFTs successfully, different trials, different stuff. But tell me about how that kind of started for you, how that kicked off, like that idea of wanting to do, you know, some sort of like gated access or token access to your music back then.
Sure. So when I was first getting started and we started talking about Tatiana Coin, it was a little bit after Amanda Palmer had that really highly successful Indiegogo campaign, and everybody was talking about it. Now, what people don't tell you about with Indiegogo campaigns is that after a while, nobody wants to keep giving you money, you little beggar. And second of all, no one wants your like ugly t-shirt, right? And so that's like, you know, and you also have to have rich friends, which is a little bit problematic. But I wanted to take that that concept of crowdfunding, but give it a little bit of an edge where you would actually own the relationship with your fan. You know, I can still be in contact with the Tatiana Coin holders despite the ups and downs of the markets and all the different changes, right? And so that was kind of my mitigation for Facebook and all these other social media platforms for owning that relationship, and also being able to finance you. So you have like the financial like ability, you have the incentive where now not only could they participate in my success on a broader scale, let's say like, oh, I sold them, you know, all the coins and now I'm extremely rich. Maybe that's good for them. I don't know, maybe not. I'm sorry, SEC, I'm not trying to break your rules. I have no money, leave me alone. But basically it becomes very challenging like for artists to have a long-term relationship. And so that's what we were trying to do. And so the Tatiana Coin was meant to be, so let's say you're my fan, you could say, hey, I'm going to send $5 worth of Tatiana Coin to my cousin Mildred because she would really like Bitcoin, but she doesn't want to hear it. So I'm going to send her some Tatiana stuff. And because Tatiana is a nice singer, then maybe she'll end up being a little bit softer. And maybe she'll eventually listen to my ranting about why the Federal Reserve is like our arch enemy, right? So like I wanted to kind of sneak it in and make it something where it was allowing an onboarding process for newbies, but based on that relationship, right? Like people like me because a lot of times because of my music, right? Because they hear something of themselves in the music that's reflected back to them. That's an extraordinarily powerful tool. You have people that like lose their minds when they meet their favorite artist, right? Sure. So why not transition that into something that's actually useful for the people? If there was ever anything that the people need to know about, it's money. Money is critical for any kind of freedom to exist, right? Like the freedom, like money is why we're all here, right? Not because we're greedy bastards a little bit, but because we know that you can't really build a foundation if every time, like out the back, they're taking the cash out, right? Which is what the Fed is doing. So, so yeah, I wanted to use it as like an education point, as a way of onboarding people. And so we issued all these coins because I wanted it to be something where everybody could participate. In retrospect, now that I see how many people like these NFTs, I'm like, damn, I should have made like 10 of them and then made a bunch of them. But luckily, as I was going through my records, I have a good friend, Freya, who does marketing, and she's just great. She works at my company, Crypto Media Hub. And we were putting together the presentation, which some people have seen going around of like my NFTs and stuff. And so we came across some older assets as well. So first we did Tatiana Coin. We fundraised, I don't know, made like 30 grand. It wasn't a lot, but I put it all toward the album. Then I put out the album, Keep the Faith. Along the way, we might want to touch on the journey with the Ross Ulbricht
yeah, absolutely.
stuff. But then we had a car, but we didn't have any roads. And so I was like, Adam, got to build the roads, buddy. I got my car. And so the Tokenly team started, really creating a lot of stuff. I like to think to my spec, because I was their guinea pig artist. I was like, listen, this is what I need. And that was also a frustrating thing, because when we were trying to pitch to VCs, I would say like, we would have this really robust set of services, and they didn't want that. They're like, what's your one thing? I'm like, the one thing is all the things in one
thing is, it's awesome. Look at how much stuff we can do.
This is and it's always been like this, like thorn in my side, that nobody ever could understand that, because as an artist, I'm like, they're like, oh, but you could, like, now I'm shopping for how to put out my album. And I can do one thing here and one thing here and one thing here. And that means I have to have 100 stupid accounts and I have to check 50 different places. And I don't want that. I want to be my master of myself. And so we started making album tokens. So tokens that were representative of my albums themselves. And then we made a Tatiana fan token. We also made Tatiana Moroz. I guess these name coins are popular now. I'm getting all the hot tips from the cool crypto NFT guys from the historical NFT fest. So anyway, like I made that in 2015. And then in 2017, I made a number of different kind of tokenizations. And we were trying to have a lot of different features, not only gated access, but, if you bought like a Tatiana token, like the main one, you would be able to access all of my content. You'd be like a super fan, and,
right.
And having like certain things that are just available for that core group. Now, the problem with that, and I felt like people really hit on that at, the HNFT, which made me really happy to hear this reflected back, is that now you have to do like 17 more jobs, right? Like when I want to put out a song, I'm putting out only the best. I'm not putting out some little half-ass demo. I'm putting out, Grammy level stuff. That's what I want. Right? I don't know. These idiots, they haven't called me yet. I don't know what's wrong with them. So anyway, like, if I have to constantly feed the beast of my fans, and this is just social media in general, like when are you actually creating artwork? Like, when are you actually writing the songs and doing this stuff? And also, like, I don't want to have to document every single portion of my life, right? Like, why? Do you guys, yes, I am an extremely good cook, but I don't plate things very nicely, and I feel this pressure. I can't just make a delicious meal. I have to make it look good, and then I have to put it on the thing, and then I have to send it to somebody, and I have to do hashtags. Like, who the effing hell has the time for this crap? So if you have to create these, secret experiences for your fans, that's fine and dandy if you have nothing to do. But like, if your fans aren't giving you enough money where you don't have to have a regular job, then you still have, okay, so now you have your regular day job, you have to like work out, and you have to like try and find a boyfriend, you have to like give your fans extra stuff, you have to like, I don't know, do other things that are, better in your life.
It's easier just to be a starving artist, right? You're like,
no, it's not.
Frankly, I'd rather just be poor and then do all that extra work.
Great. My suffering will benefit artists to come, I hope, because I just can't put up with it anymore. Like, this is an ongoing problem. And sometimes people will look at me and they'll say, oh, you're so successful. And I'm supposed to say, yes, I am. That's correct. But the reality is, I'm like, what, are you kidding me, man? Like, I got a long way to go for where I think successful is to where I'm at. But, we acknowledge that. And And I am grateful to have other people acknowledging that they're not all perfect and that we're not exactly where we need to be. And so now we can grow together, you know?
It's and I've talked to a lot of artists, and musical artists as well, because I was working with a music platform trying to build something like you guys were building, you know, back in 2016. It's incredibly difficult. And but I've spoken with, over the last, you know, 18 months, hundreds of artists. And but the fact of the matter is most artists don't make any money, right? And and so, you know, NFTs provide an avenue, but still, like, you still, it's, and this was the hard thing that was, you know, difficult to kind of, you know, tell an artist, which is like, look, you can make music, whatever it is you're making your song, but unless you can do kind of these other things that you're talking about, which is basically be a marketing arm, be a PR firm, unless you can do this other stuff, as an independent artist, it's probably not going to work out for you, right? Like, unless you have some other skills, or are fortunate enough, like you said, to be connected with those people who can help you do those other things. It's darn near impossible. I mean, it's right there.
But if you're a kid, you don't think that it's going to be impossible. That's the problem. As much as I really grind my teeth to say this, my family trying to push me to have a real job was actually really good advice. Because, you know, like, I was working at recording studios. It was really cool, but I didn't have health insurance. Like, and I didn't have any money in my bank account. It was like horrible. So in a weird way, you're better off making a lot of money and then you can try and buy your way in. But I was, you know, now I'm trying to raise some money to promote the record. And the way I figure it is an indie album needs minimum 50K. Like as like a real marketing budget to have any kind of real chance, right? Maybe you could do it for 25 or 30K, but like, what is the ROI on that? Right? Like, let's say I had that money in my bank account, which unfortunately in this bear market made my bank account look really depressing. I'm like, oh, wow, it's back to college days.
You need to sell some of those Tatiana coins.
But this is what I'm talking about. Emblem Paul, help me out. But you know, now, oh gosh, I forgot what I was going to say.
No, the marketing budget and how hard.
Oh yeah.
Is, right?
But like, how can you even justify that? Like, even if I had, let's say I had like $500,000 set up, I'm like, all right, I got my money. I'm going to give what, 20% away of my income so I can try and put out 100K for an album that's going to generate $45. I mean, give me an effing break. I already wasted money on recording the damn thing, and now I have to spend more. And like, the reality is like, it's not a good investment. There isn't a way to make the money back unless you're a wizard. And so I throw myself upon the mercy of the people. Like, I want people to remember that artists are not rich. We're still poor.
Well, I mean, it's like you need to hit, and obviously Taylor Swift is one example, but that's like family connections, wealth, all this other stuff, right? You have like, I don't even know, like, okay, Justin Bieber, right? Oh, he made a YouTube video and boom, now he's famous. It's like, something tells me there was a whole bunch of more steps in that process, you know?
Exactly. Well, that's why I hated, like, I remember when America's Got Talent and all those shows were really, really popular. And everybody was like, go on that show, go audition. You should be on it. You'd be great. You'd be the next American Idol. After hearing this 4 billion times, I figured, you know what? I'm going to go. Maybe they'll effing leave me alone. So I went. It was a very hilarious experience. I didn't even get past the first round. And look, I'm better than the low grade, like the worst people that they put on there, right? So it's an effing TV show, people. And people think that like, oh, you just go on that show and now you're famous. And there was this bitterness from my family, like, well, you didn't go on American Idol, so of course you're not going to be famous, like, you loser. Like there's no other success other than like American Idol as like a goal. And it gives a lot of artists this fake, stupid impression of what the music business is like. I mean, in a way, it gives you a great impression because it shows you that it's a con job, right? But like I did get into, there's like America's Got Talent and then like some other one,
or something.
Yeah. And they did ask me to be on that one. They came to my show. They saw me perform. The guy waited 3 hours for me to perform again. Like, they were really into it. But when they gave me the contract, I gave it to my lawyer friend and he was like, yeah, this is a bad contract. You can't sign
This
it.
is the worst contract
Yeah,
I've
it's
ever
like the
seen
worst
in my
contract
life,
ever.
man.
So people are sitting around being like, you should try and be like this person. I'm like, do you look at prostitutes and say, oh, I wish you should act like this person? Because that's what they are. They're whoring themselves for a penny, like a chance of a career. And then all of their ownership of their music is gone for life. I mean, how can you possibly in good conscience be promoting this to people? And it's so demoralizing, right? And also, you would think that when I didn't get in, they would leave me alone because they would feel bad. They'd be like, oh, she's such a loser. I'm not going to like mention it to her. But no, they still mention it to me. I'm like, just leave me alone and take your show and just you and Simon Cowell can go make out on a pillow. Like, I'm not doing this. But yeah, it's really disheartening. And now you have all these Instagram kind of stars. And they didn't do the things that you're supposed to do. They didn't cut their teeth the way that, there's something like, I got to be, I think, a better public speaker because I did so much musical performance. And, when you go to do a performance, I'll never forget, there was a gig in Manhattan I was playing, right? And I'm singing my song. It's like all sad and like heartbreaking. This a-hole that works for them starts hammering on the wall because he had to like put up a poster or something, just hammering away in the middle of my song. I'm like, I'm gonna effing die. I'm gonna kill myself right here on the stage with the hammer. Like, are you kidding me? And it was, this is what artists have to deal with. But when somebody's hammering on the wall, you can't be on the stage like, excuse me, I'm here. Like, you need, which I learned over years, like you need to command the audience. That's your job. It's not like those people are rude, but you can't break character and just start like demanding that people pay attention to you. And I've gone to gigs where they didn't have sound, where the sound is kicking up. Like all sorts of things are going on that are really bad that make you a professional. And those people that are just making videos in their house, I'm glad that they have that as a creative outlet. And they're probably more successful than me, but I just can't see how that's really creating a true craft. I think it's just like playing karaoke in your basement,
It's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It's
sorry to depress you. I feel like
it's a new world, man. I mean, like this is like the thing. And I've seen that. Obviously, I'm 50 now, so I've gone through this massive change in our world, right? And old rules are broken, completely like shattered, right? And barriers and entries and putting in work isn't necessarily even rewarded anymore, right? The kind of get rich quick idea that most people have, you and I know is a myth because I've seen it, with my friends who are fabulously successful. And I also know they grinded for 25 years, right? And I know that if you want to be successful, usually that is the best path to success. It's not to say that you can't be a Justin Bieber and you're one in a billion who gets famous in 6 months because you played drums on a bucket on a YouTube video. It can happen, but it's so rare as to be impossible. You might as well go, buy a lottery ticket, right?
or
I
Bitcoin.
know that
That's what I suggest.
Yeah.
No, seriously, people like artists are like, what should I do? Like people oftentimes are like, oh, what should artists do if they want to get into NFTs and into crypto? I'm like, buy Bitcoin. Like, don't mess around with these NFTs. You can mess around with them, but the best thing that you can have is financial independence. You have to have money. If you don't have money, you don't have anything. I can't tell you how many businesses they tried to build out because they didn't understand that I needed capital in order to get them going. And like, determination is not sufficient. You really need money, just money. Think about how to make money. And then
it's funny because I've done, I did years worth of podcasts talking about business in Costa Rica and moving to Costa Rica and all this sort of stuff. And people ask me, well, I don't know, they wanted to, whatever, they wanted to do music, right? Well, how can I do it? And I'm like, well, the best way is to have a really good job that grants you some free time and you do music on your free time. Like that's the best way. Not to try and make a living doing music. No, make a living, then do your music, right?
Yeah, but
like, I don't have time to start a podcast. It's like, no, start a podcast while you keep your job. Do whatever you want to do while you keep your job. You don't need to give up your job to do what you're doing. It's called nights and weekends. Like, get to work. And I think part of
easy though. Like, I think that, one gets burnt out when you have a 40-hour work week, right? You don't feel like it's not the same as being able to do it full time. It's really like, it's also an identity and like and a mindset, right? The identity is a little bit ego, but the mindset of the creator is it's impossible to do other things, right? Like, you have to create. And then
It's
you're
interesting because when I talk to like writers, they
Mhm.
often run into the opposite of that,
Tell
where
me.
they can't create anything because they're staring at a page and they just can't move. And I know this for myself because I write, and I know how just like this like wall of resistance is there. And I think the people I've talked with who are the best writers, who I would consider the best, use incredible amounts of discipline to say, okay, it doesn't matter. This 3-hour block of window every day of my life is the time I sit in a room and I write, and I give myself no other options. They actually create a discipline around it rather than, and I've noticed just because I know myself, without that discipline myself, I become a blob of useless nothingness, right? Where
I think there's a happy middle ground between being like an unemployed person that's like, maybe I'll write a book today, maybe not.
yeah.
And then like going from your day job to your night job to this job. Like, I feel like my whole entire life has consisted of me being poor and just trying to have enough money to do my music. And that struggle kills creativity. Like, there are certain aspects of it that I think can be helpful, but on a net thing, like, I just don't believe that I need to suffer infinitely and never have any personal time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what if I want to do something like, I don't know, join a running club, start playing chess, some kind of nerd shit. Like, I don't know. I can't do any of it because I'm sorry, I keep cursing. I shouldn't curse.
No, curse, go ahead. I love it.
I don't like cursing in public. I feel like it's unladylike. But, like, I mean, that's the whole thing about balance. That's why I started the show called Proof of Love in the crypto space, was because I felt like everybody was only focusing on their work and they were suffering as a whole person because they weren't able to deal with their childhood trauma, be nice to their kids, like, maybe like find some inner peace in themselves. And they weren't well-rounded enough. I think when you're on the rat race and you're just trying to survive, the creative process is like disgusting a little bit. It's like sad and frail and like a little piece of garbage instead of like the glorious.
It's interesting. I would debate you about this.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying.
Have you been a broke artist before? What are your qualifications?
Oh, I've been a broke before.
Have you eaten ramen?
Trust me, I've been broke. I think, and almost everybody has the experience of being broke, right? Most everybody. And you hear stories about people and their ability to still create being completely broke, and some of the genius that comes out of that. I don't know what I was listening to the other hours. It was Rocky, Sylvester Stallone, right? When he sold his first script, right? He had to sell his dog for like $25 or whatever because he didn't have any money, like, to pay his rent or whatever it was, back in the day.
I hope he didn't sell his dog. That's really cruel and not okay.
I know, I agree, dude.
I didn't get a very good price for it, like $25. Like, what the hell? This is like a pre-owned dog,
like
that
stuff like that.
I
mean, obviously it's a cliche, right? The starving artist. I do believe there is, just because I've experienced it myself, there is something to when you have money and you have complete freedom, might work for somebody. It obviously works. You've said it's worked for you, where you have that now. This decompression of not having to worry about money allows the creative.
I'm back into the stress zone, just FYI.
Right.
So
I mean, part of it for me, honestly, is the stress actually compels work. And I will say, for me, definitively, the stress of, it might not be money, but it's definitely like timelines and promises and whatever, that compels work for me. And I think for a lot of people, creatives too, that kind of like whatever the publisher due date is coming up on the 15th and you haven't written a word and it's the 10th and you bang out an entire book in 5 days. Like those stories are real, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm one of
yeah.
those procrastinating people as well. So I hear you.
Yeah.
But like, it just, look, the Gulag Archipelago is supposed to be a really good book, right? But like, I'm pretty sure he would have preferred not to be in the Gulag and like show his brilliant writing skills, right? Like, isn't there a middle ground?
Well, there might not be. I mean, look, it may be this kind of matrix dichotomy, which is like, if everything was perfect and everybody had whatever they needed, what would happen would be nothing. What would happen would be the full end of artistic works. And people have talked about that quite a bit when it came to like communism and stuff. Did that enhance creativity or crush creativity, right? Do you get more creativity out of Hollywood and the cutthroat industry, or do you get out of, Cuba, right? Which produces more great content? I don't know. Maybe needing money is important for the artistic pursuit.
So a while back, I did this Tatiana show with John Light and Jeffrey Tucker. And I think those are the two people that I had on, and they were doing the debate about copyright. Now, as an artist, I like copyright. That's the immediate like feeling toward it. But an argument that one of them, maybe even both of them, made to me was that you become like a rent seeker, or some kind of like expression where basically, like if you make a really big hit song and now you've got money, now you have no incentive to keep making other songs, and therefore the world suffers because they don't get the gift of your artwork because you're sitting around too cushy. And I was like, listen, a-hole, nobody's sitting around cushy, okay? Like, there's no cush, okay? A person could spend their entire life making one song that cuts through. It doesn't mean that they weren't working the rest of the time. It doesn't mean that everything that they made before and after is trash either. So I haven't quite decided what I think about that idea. I think some suffering is necessary. There has to be a balance, but I would like it to be a little bit more in between, a little bit more sustainable. And also I'd really just like to see more live music in general. Like a lot of people in Miami are really into club music and stuff, and I'm not really into club music. So I've been hosting some live music at my house. I'm having these salons, and so sometimes I'll have some speakers and then I'll do some live performance. But what I noticed is that everybody wants to play. Everybody not that that's a good thing, right? Because some people it's like get the hook, but people really like to have that creative side to them. And even if somebody's not that great at guitar and singing, like it still just gives a certain warm vibe to the room. And so I don't know, I'm just going to try and do some more live shows and enjoy the process of doing music and hopefully having some friends listen.
Well, I think at the core of it, almost with this whole like social media and how we interact as humans and all this sort of stuff, it's definitely, I've got a lot of benefit from just seeing things I could be grateful about, right? And when you, like as an artist, when you've impacted somebody's life and somebody comes up to you and is like, oh man, I love that. Actually like feeling, oh my God, I've impacted that one person's life, right? And that's powerful. And if you allow that, impact that at least I affected one person, then it does become rewarding,
Yeah, there are those moments. I have one actually. So I did a song called Masters of War. It's a cover of an old Bob Dylan song. And somebody wrote me afterward, and they were telling me about how they lived in Serbia, and that maybe they said Yugoslavia. I think that there's a difference now, but anyway, sorry. So they were in that war, and there was a little girl, I think her name is Mila. She was actually quite famous, and she had died. And he was basically saying like, this is like such a place of darkness and your voice is the light. I was like, oh, like how could you say something like that, right? Like
sure.
what an important role and job I have. You know what I mean? Like, because that's some real stuff, right? That's not like, I broke up with my boyfriend. Yeah, girl, I'm gonna get it. Like, yeah, that's one thing. But to be able to offer a small ray of hope in these utterly dark moments, that makes up for like a couple of years of poverty, true, right? I remember I used to
I'd have preferred not to go through the poverty, but it's okay. That made it less bad.
Well, there are these little things, and that's why it's really important when people are moved by something, like go up to that person, say something like,
Absolutely.
I remember I was in Avatar recording studios and Ryan Adams came into the studio and everybody was telling me that I sounded like Ryan, not Brian. Ryan Adams, amazing, prolific songwriter. But I didn't like listen to his music that much, but I knew that I had to meet him. So anyway, turns out he's sitting in my lobby and I'm in a cranky mood and I couldn't tell who he was because he looked kind of dirty. And I mess up his burger order and I'm like, whatever, this guy. And then all of a sudden it occurs to me that he's there and I'm like, wow. And so on my MySpace page, it says like, if Fiona Apple, Willie Nelson and Ryan Adams had a baby, like, this is what it would be like that. Like, so I'm literally calling him in the thing. And so he ends up chatting me up and he sits there and he plays through maybe 4 or 5 of my songs. He keeps playing them on repeat. And I was like, wow. And then afterward, he's like, you're great. Like, let me know when you're playing a show, blah, blah. He never came to my show. And I think he's a little bit creepy from what I understand, like the chick. But I lived off of that for 15 years. Sure. Because if Ryan Adams, who I think is just the best, thinks I'm worth anything, then there's got to be some like reason to keep going. And so, like that's the other thing, like encourage. That's what I think is like a big takeaway is what I want. And I think that's why like artists want to be building these communities is because they need that support. They don't want to get lost in like the 50 million people on your feed and then you forget about me the next day, Yep. So I don't know. It's a struggle, right?
It's a struggle, but I think actually for all the bad of social media and that sort of thing is this is actually the great thing, which is, your reach is kind of limited and stuff, but if you are able to make something that impacts people, you can actually form relationships with people around your art or your music or whatever it is. And I think these kind of Web3 solutions which you were exploring back in the day are kind of coming around, and artists have access to those now. And I mean, we're literally at just the beginning of it, right? You were pioneering it years ago. But right now people are learning like, oh, I could sell my, this song as an NFT and release 20 of them and people buy them for $1 each, but then they own them and they're actually interested in me, and there's that kind of like reciprocal relationship. And, we definitely have not experienced, the first artist that's going to drop their music first as an NFT and then blow up later. Like when that actually happens, I think there may be a moment where people are like, oh, what is this? Maybe this is something.
Yeah, we still have a ways to go. And then I don't know, did you talk with Adam a little bit about the AI stuff? Because I think that that's pretty neat as well.
It's so fantastic, fascinating. Actually, before we get into the AI stuff though, I did have some questions around, I saw you did like a physical coin around the time when you did your first token. What was that about? Tell me about the physical coin, because that was kind of interesting.
Sure. So basically earlier this year, Freya and we were going through my NFT stuff because I would like to do an exhibition, and we were assembling all of my different kind of assets that I had. And one of the first things that I made was with Steve Dack, we made a 3D printed Tatiana Coin back in 2014. And one of my fans had actually made me the Tatiana Coin logo. And so we made a little 3D printed coin, but because the idea of a coin is so hard for people to conceptualize, I knew early on that I wanted to have physical representations. Obviously, I'm not going to print 3 million brass tokens, but I printed 100 of them. So first I had like a test run, and I still have a few of those. Those are floating around. I didn't make that many of them. And then I made 100 of these brass tokens with a little coupon code or like a code associated with them. And the goal was to then give them prizes. The problem is that I always thought that Tokenly was going to be done making the tools that I wanted in time for my releases, which is a little bit of a mismatch because tech takes forever. But yeah, the goal was to kind of enable those holders of those tokens. Those were like the special guys. They would have some kind of advanced powers. So we made 3 different kinds of physical tokens. And then another thing that I also made was that was in the collection that I thought was really cool was, early on, I learned about the Silk Road, and And at first I was like, this is like a terrible idea. Like, guy's going to get in trouble. I'm like, why did he think it was going to be otherwise? You know, and that was all I thought about it. Right. But when I met Lynn Ulbricht and I did an interview with her, I was so moved by her story and by understanding the depth of the corruption and the extent that the drug war is waged not only on drug users, but you know, their families and you know, the dealers, they're selling a product people want, right? Like, there's a lot of different questions that came up. And I even visited Ross over probably a dozen times in prison. And so we became very good friends. And so I wrote a song called The Silk Road. And so when I put out Keep the Faith, Ross, for my birthday, had taken this photo I had sent him by a famous libertarian photographer, Judd Weiss. And Judd took this photo, Ross drew it in prison, and I decided to use that as the album cover because I thought that this is really representative of why artists need artist coins, because this is a political dissident, this is a political prisoner. Some people look at him as a criminal. And if I was signed to a record label, like, I might not be allowed to do that. And that's
definitely not be allowed to do that.
Yeah. So this is specifically why we need this freedom, right? Because we have to be able to speak against the status quo and preferably, like, you know, still have money for a sandwich afterward, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, I also wanted to bring attention to the ongoing story of what was happening with Ross, right? I wrote The Silk Road as a ballad because I wanted people to cry. I wanted them to feel something. And then I wanted them to, like, sign the petition or take some kind of an action, not look at this person as, oh, he's a murderer, blah, blah, which never was proven. It's just nonsense. Even if he was a murder for hire, it's a 10-year sentence, not double life plus 40 years. You know, that whole argument is just infinitely irritating. But, you know, it opens up that conversation. And it also, in a way, because I figured it would be referenced, it would be a call to action for other artists. Like, hey, your job is not to just look cute on Instagram. You're actually supposed to do some soul searching. You're supposed to represent, like, the human experience in some way. And I was really lucky that I had that experience, you know, getting to know him and his family and getting to know firsthand what that's like, because then I can go off and I can share that. So, you know, I have that memorabilia. I've got the little tokens, and then I've got those early use cases, a whole bunch of them. So I've got quite a little collection.
I saw, like, I looked through a lot of the tokens. Did you do all of them on Counterparty, or did you do any on any other platforms? They're all on
Counterparty was the only contender at the time. Really, like, Mastercoin was asking me to do something with them, and there's some miscommunication that really, like, I wasn't really turned on. But the reality is that Counterparty was the better tech. You know, Mastercoin, if I recall, like, was actually going to give me a little bit of money to promote them, which was very nice, and I would have liked that. But I ended up going with Counterparty, which didn't give me anything, but I just felt like they had the tech right. And it turns out they had the tech right, but they didn't have any marketing at all. So that was, like, in my opinion, just an epic fail and a really, really lost opportunity, because then everybody cares about stupid freaking Ethereum. I mean, Ethereum's I love Ethereum. Can't wait to mint my tokens on there. But, you know, like, the Counterparty to me has that community feel, whereas Ethereum feels like, bro, we got all the money. You know, like, if I had all of the money that no offense to Lubin, but Lubin's company had for that mycelium project, like, God, I would have built such great stuff with that. They had so much cash available to them. And then just a big fat blob of nothing, you know, like, no real accomplishments where I can, like, point to something and say, okay, you guys got, like, probably over $100 million for this crap. Like, can you give me one working product, one thing? And there's just nothing available. So, you know, but Counterparty has its own issues. We don't have enough money. You got bickering, which is, I guess, everywhere. Everybody's like,
sure.
Which is fine, because everybody's passionate and they care about it, right? If they weren't bickering, then it means that they don't care enough, right? But at the time, Ethereum had made the announcement, and those, you know, those guys had similar visions, you know, in terms of, like, Tatiana Coin and Coin kind of like concepts for artists. It's not like I was the only one that ever came up with that idea. I just happened to be really early, and so that's good. But they had all the resources, and with all those resources, I would like to see some results, and I don't see them. So they're going to come to my office Monday morning. First thing, they're going to get a talking to. So we'll see what happens.
How many, so you, for each album you've released a tokens with it. Is that right?
Correct. So I released albums. I have, this is going to be my 4th full-length record. All of these are done by me, indie albums. And then I have 2 EPs. So those were the ones that in 2017, when we started issuing album tokens, we only made 900 of all of those. So 900 per album. And then we made the Tatiana fan one, and then Tatiana album is like a overall album token that gives you access to all the albums. And then there was the Tatiana Moroz one. So all of those we still have, actually.
You have them, but none of those were distributed, right? You didn't.
None of those were distributed. Only Tatiana Coins have been distributed, and there's not that many holders. And then, of course, I was lucky enough to be a part of the Spells of Genesis cards. So that's really cool.
That's really cool, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm always trying to like hang out with like the nerds and be like, hey guys, I'm cool too.
Look, here's my Spells of Genesis card. Nerd.
I want to get into the nerd club. Like, I want to, but I really just don't understand. And that's why I think we still have the disconnect. Like, we're the artists and the tech people. They need a few more dates before they can consummate their love, because they're not really seeing eye to eye. Like, the artists who are like, what the hell are you guys talking about? And these people are like, don't you see how cool this is? They're like, no, I don't see how cool this is. So you need to have a little bit more of a art crossover. But that's kind of something that I like to specialize in. That's why I'm doing these events here in Miami, because I want to bring together the creative people and also give back the creative side to some of the tech people. Because they don't always get to nurture that part of their tree.
Yeah. Well, I think it is cool. I mean, if you do want to distribute some of those tokens, later or whatever, certainly there are a lot of people who would like to collect them, because what you were trying to do with Adam back in the day and was very early in this kind of thought process. And I think we'll become much more clear about where that goes over the next, decade. I mean, we're still at step 1, in my view. It's like nobody's done music NFTs right, or music tokens, or, I mean, we're so far away from it. We've all become addicted to, basically free music, right? Spotify, and, that just does not work for the small creator at all, right? I mean,
no, it's a real epic fail.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, like, if you have like 1 million plays on a song, do you know how hard it is to get 1 million plays on a song? It's like virtually impossible. And if you do, you get maybe like $1,000 tops. Like, what are you going to do with that? Like, you're going to tell me that all the time it took to get to 1 million plays is worth $1,000? And then they'll say, oh, you can do merchandising and merchandising. Oh, okay.
It's like nobody's buying t-shirts, man.
No,
Nobody.
and like, what am I going to make? Like $7 profit off of a t-shirt sold every 3 months? Like, what are you talking about? The worst. People, I would recommend that people who don't have experience in the music industry think twice before giving stupid advice.
Yeah.
So annoying.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a few people do, music NFT successful. Obviously, some big ones like Blau or somebody, they're in a whole different level and can do kind of these larger, NFT drops and stuff. But even small, creators like Spotty Wi-Fi, who I'm sure you're probably familiar with, right? He does very small kind of curated drops for, small numbers, but, makes a living. Like, he just did this really cool like album where he did like 300 versions of the wax pressed album with a chip inside the album that, brings up the NFT and it's tied to the album. Really cool. But he's selling to his, very small, group of collectors, but it works for him. I think like that right now seems to me like the best strategy for a small creator, but I don't know, what would be your advice to a small creator looking to like do NFTs and stuff like that?
Low expectations. That's it. Seriously, just don't expect anything. That's the best way to do it, because this is why I'm like, I'm always frustrated. But like, people are always trying to come to artists and they're like, oh my God, you could do this thing and it's going to make you so much money and you're going to be famous. And And as a diligent artist, you have to follow up on every lead. You know, you really got to go for it. And if you know that you're just not worth your salt, and you have to, like, it's built into how you are, that you have to pursue all of these little things. But you can't actually get anywhere if you're looking at all the little things, right? All the time. You have to be kind of focused. So if somebody's making NFTs, but then they've got like 17 other platforms that they're trying to pay attention to, right? If they want to be cutting edge and do it for like bragging rights, that's basically about as good as it's going to get right now. They can help shape the future. They can be a part of that conversation. They can hang out with the nerds, but they're not going to be making money like doing that anytime soon.
Yep.
Their fans don't even know what an NFT is. They don't know. They don't care. They just want you to like talk to them and make songs and be happy and whatever it is that fans want from their artists, right? They don't like necessarily know that they should want NFTs. It's a certain type of person that wants that stuff. And that's not going to be your whole fan base. Like, think about it. When I issued Tatiana Coin, I was the first one. I had a fair amount of press, and I had a bunch of super like, you know, crypto fans, and half of them couldn't even figure out how to buy my tokens. Literally couldn't figure it out. Super smart guys I call with my tech help. They're like, hey, yo, what's going on with this? I don't know how to do it, right? Like, so you're gonna have that for a while. And so I don't want artists to divert their energy and chase like another shiny puppy, you know what I mean? Or like I don't know. I don't even get excited when people are like, oh, I'm going to introduce you to somebody. Oh, this is going to be your big break. It's like, F you, man. No, it's not. And then you have the annoying people who are like, you have to think positive. And I'm
wait,
like,
have you set up your TikTok yet? You need to get a TikTok account. You're
what,
like,
just ripping on people, like cracking jokes and making fun of the world? I mean, I have a TikTok. I don't know how to use it. I don't want to use it. I don't want to have to report everything. The only thing I want to do with TikTok is complain. And I think that there's a market for that. I'm not going to lie.
There is, for sure. You can find your niche.
But is that really like benefiting the world? Like sometimes, all right, the other day I made a post about fake butts. And this post was catching fire on Twitter. Like I was like, I don't understand who told these girls that these fake butts look good. It looks ridiculous. It looks like their butts are going to pop. And then I thought about it and I was like, I don't need to do this. I don't need to make fun of girls because they're like insecure and they don't like their flat booties. Like they want a big booty, go for it, ladies. Does it look preposterous? Yes. But I don't need to be propagating this like the girls who are making the big booties already don't like themselves that much. You know what I mean? Like, am I making the world a better place? And as such, if I want to make like big, like I'm a grade A complainer, and I really could make fun of people and be really funny, but I don't know if I'm really making the world a better place by doing something like that. And I just want to be a little bit more mindful about my contribution. It goes back to a little bit about what you were talking about. You want to make people mad because it gives them an emotion. And then you get the little thrill. And then you're like, yeah, I hate that person. And like, at the end of the day, like, is the world getting better from that nonsense? I don't think so. And it goes to a larger pursuit. Like, I love conspiracy videos. Like I'm on Telegram. I'm like, oh, give me the latest like alien invasion. Like I want to know what's going to happen, you know? But after a certain point, I'm like, why am I indulging in this? Like, I already know the vaccinated are going down. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm not trying to antagonize anybody. But like, all I'm saying is like, how many times am I going to hear about the same bad news over and over again? It becomes like an addiction. And as such, I'm trying to not feed into the funny negative things that I can say, like with like a little bit of restraint on that, because I just don't see like how much better it's going to make things, except for like gallows humor, which is always appreciated.
Yeah, it's interesting, like that idea that you're kind of talking about. It's very easy to go down those rabbit holes, and I'll speak personally. This week I went down a YouTube rabbit hole of like, I won't even get into what it was.
But let's just say
I was hours and hours on YouTube, hours and hours and hours and hours on YouTube down this rabbit hole. And finally, after like a 6-hour session, I said to myself, I need to stop, because I'm literally addicted to this. And I'm looking at my YouTube page and it's all more of this same content. And I said, you know what? That's it. I have to stop. And I literally deleted the YouTube app off my phone. I was like, I can't do this because they figured out something that pushes my buttons so hard that now they've realized it wasn't like, oh, and here's something about the New York Jets or the news or anything. No, it was only this. That's the only thing we're going to show you. And I was like,
my money is on flat Earth. I know you don't believe in the roundness of this planet. It's a big lie. I've seen that horizon. It
wasn't that. I'll tell you what it was. What it was this thing called what do they call it? They call it constitutional audits. And what these guys do is they're free speech advocates. And part of free speech is your ability to record in public, record video in public from a public place. And so they'll walk into like town halls or whatever, and they'll walk around with their camera, and then people will approach them and you can't film in here. And then they, will call the police and get the police there. And then everybody, eventually they're teaching people, no, this is actually free speech. Right. And so I'm a big free speech guy. I love free speech. And so obviously this like hits me seeing these people like, you can't say that. You can't video that. It gets me emotional because I believe that's so wrong, right? And so it just hooked me in. And literally the only thing YouTube would show, it figured me out in like 5 hours. Like, oh, this guy loves this kind of content. And so all we're going to feed him is like a rat who's addicted to cocaine. They were just like, here's more of it. Here's more. And I'm like up at 2 a.m, and I finally, was like, I have to stop. Like, and it was hard to be like, okay, delete the YouTube app. But you realize that that's what it is today. And so from a creator perspective, it's very easy to say, oh, what I'll do is I'll create content that feeds one aspect of the algorithm. Right. And I've seen it with friends of mine, like who have posted negative comments on Twitter and get a lot of engagement. And it's the first time they've ever really gotten engagement.
That's why I won't do it. I don't want to be that person.
And they keep doing that. They keep doing the negative content because it gets them engagement. And it's kind of sad, honestly.
It's tempting. Because you also, like, as a person, you kind of want to gossip. You kind of want to talk trash. Like, you want an outlet for your own upsetness. It's not just that you want you want that feeling of righteousness. You want that feeling of community through anger. It's almost like the 2 minutes of hate or whatever in 1984, where they all just get in the room and start raging all mad and stuff. Like, you want that, but that's not the move. That's
it's funny because at the core of it is, I think we're so new into this realm of social media that we have to kind of figure this all out. We're still in the figuring out stage, and we beat ourselves up like we should already have this figured out. But this is like brand new. I mean, this is like, we haven't gone through any generations of people who would know how to kind of deal with this. Right. And so at the core, I think, good humans, it's my hope that good humans will prevail and we'll all get through this better on the other side. But it's a bit of a shit show right now.
For sure. And then you have all the shadow banning stuff, that kind of makes you not know, like, if what you're saying is falling on deaf ears or not. Right. And when I was looking at my album promotion performance with my gals, they're like, you know what, Tatiana? They're like, I didn't believe you before. They're like, but I'm pretty sure you're shadow banned. And I'm like, no shit. Like, I've been trying to tell you people this for years. And then you never know. And you're like, shut up, loser. No one likes your content anyway.
If your main topic is Bitcoin, freedom, and liberty, you're screwed.
Well, this is what I kind of think about, right? Like, I wrote this song called, God, what was it called? Make a YouTube video. And I put it out during the Ron Paul days. And I'm like, why isn't YouTube picking this up? It was so clever. It was such a great song, and it was really catchy, and it did nothing. It had no performance on there at all. And I was like, I don't understand why this isn't happening. And you're stuck with the feeling that you think is right, which is you suck, right? That's the one feeling. But then there's the other part that's like, maybe you're shadow banned. Maybe it's just a little shadow banned. And you're like, shut up. Maybe it's true. Maybe I am shadow banned. And like, you have like this internal struggle, like, in order to. And that's what I hate about it. It's like, it's like high school and all of your like popularity contests writ large, right? And then you have to do things in order to like, okay, so there's these really pretty, very, very pretty, very talented girls. I think it was two of them. And they did this song like I'm not going to screw you because of your NFTs or whatever. Like,
oh yeah, I remember. Yeah.
yeah, like I'm not going to be a crypto boy. It was
Mhm.
it was a great song. It really was really great little pop song. There was a small part of me that was annoyed because my friends are sending me this and I'm like, God damn it, it's so kitschy, right? But like, I can't keep writing Bitcoin jingles. Like, come on, that's like not even artistic at all. That's like what a Al Yankovic does. And I'm sure that Al Yankovic is a talented guy, but like, I don't like parody songs. I don't feel like it's real. But that's a perfect example of why you feel the pressure to do it. And again, not to take away from those girls. It was brilliant, really, really good. And they did it in a way where you could have fans like interacting and then they do like a verse on top of it. And I was like, oh man, I'm not clever enough to figure this one out. But like, I don't want to do that. Like, I just want to write a song and I want to play it. And then I want people to listen to it. I don't want to have to write like a rap in the middle and like leave space for like, 7 other like guest artists. Like, I don't want to do that. I just want to do like a regular thing. And so I'm like, I'm too good for this. I'm a real artist. Because, people will approach
Well,
me.
you're a real artist, and guess what? Nobody's gonna see it.
Right. So it's like the endless struggle, right? I mean, this whole episode has just been like, being an artist sucks, and here are the 45 reasons why you shouldn't choose this as a career.
It is interesting. I mean, it does cut across everything, though. It's not just artists. I truly believe that it's everything, and especially in social media and the way the algorithms work. The algorithms want you to niche down completely and fit into a niche and not talk about anything but that niche. And it's a real struggle just as a writer and as somebody who has, like myself, I have a million interests. But for example, I never talk about the New York Jets on my Twitter, right? Because I know that the 30,000 people who follow me, probably near none of them are interested in the New York Jets. I'm very interested in the New York Jets, right? But you can't pollute your feed, right? You have to be like this super niche thing, right? And
yeah, I want to bring back the well-rounded person.
I agree.
But that's why, like, even with crypto people, sometimes I'm like, do you guys have nothing else to talk about? Like, this is it? This is the whole conversation? Like, I just have to listen to this all day long, every single day. And like, well, you don't like crypto enough. I'm like, I like crypto fine. I'm not psychotically obsessed with it like you guys.
No,
and
I think at the core, we all now know intuitively that we will be basically shadow banned, or our content will be be put down so far that algorithm list that even when we do talk to our crypto native people about something maybe important, it's just going to fall on deaf ears because the algorithm is just going to shadow ban it.
That's why
I don't know what the solution is on that one.
Well, the solution is we make a game that's fair, right? And that's the whole point. That's why I don't want to participate in these things. People are like, oh, well, if you do this, you can get a lot of likes and stuff. I'm like, I don't even want to play in their dirty game. This is BS, because it's always going to, if it's not hard for me, it's going to be hard for somebody else. And so, we all need to kind of create options that are not just, obey and we'll give you a little crumb of liking.
Well, as soon as somebody builds that next platform that allows us to, when somebody follows you, they actually see all your stuff, maybe one day, I don't know.
Fingers crossed. We've got a lot of smart people around us, so hopefully. I mean, I'd really like to see the DAO thing happen. I have my doubts around DAOs. They are very hard to understand overall. I don't think that a lot of people end up doing votes and stuff. But it is a cool idea, and it's really cool for the community to benefit from their contributions. So I mean, to me, that's, unless like some super rich, non-jerkish like rich person like gives us a bunch of money, I think that's like the solution, right? Like either you get like somebody really like believes in it and is gonna not try and turn it into something lame, right? That's like the hope, right? Then you have the other option where somebody rich takes it and like ruins it, and that's definitely not what you want. And then you have the option of it becoming the people's thing. But the problem with the people's currency is that that people are really disorganized. Like, that's why I don't really like decentralization. I'm into to a certain point. But sometimes I'm like, no, I need a center. I need a dictator. Like, give me some instruction, you know? And I don't think that that should be like, you know, the Terminator, like a computer entity at all times either, right? Like, you want like a human touch. So, but again, here we are at the forefront, right? Like, we're forging new ground and figuring it out as we go. And there'll probably be some dead bodies, you know, it's how it goes.
Well, I know we're over our time here, but tell me a little bit about the AI if you have a couple more minutes.
Sure, I'd love to. I'm actually really excited about this. So as an indie artist, one of the things that I would run into is I would do the whole album. I'd save my, like, you know, little pennies from $15 an hour and, like, you know, put it aside. And then it would come to the point where I'd have to do the album cover. And that was a whole other nightmare. It was, first of all, a big expense. Number two, I don't know, I'm not great at communicating visual concepts to graphic designers. And so then what happens is then they come back to you and you're like, this is totally wrong. And then they come back to you with like 7 things that are totally wrong. And by the 7th thing, you're like, I think it's okay. And then, like, it sucks too, but you can't get this really good communication. And so when we were doing the Tatiana Coin album, I'm sorry, the Love Songs for Idiots, the new album, we're thinking about the album cover. I'm like, well, it's got to be something cool. My last one was made by like a jail guy. I'm like, it's got to be, you know, a step up. And so what we started to play around with was this concept of, like, you know, the Bachelorette, where, you know, if you're a girl, you try on a lot of different identities. You're like, oh, maybe I'll act like a homemaker. Maybe I'll act like slutty. Ooh, maybe I'll be like the tomboy. Maybe I'll be like the edgy, you know, like, you try on these things. You're like, oh, then my true love will find me, right? And so we did these kind of like Bachelorette type pictures. And what I originally wanted to do was have different elements of kind of like CryptoPunks, how they had like one little tiny difference here, one little tiny difference there, and kind of make it collectible, or I make it like a dating game. So I thought that that would be really fun, like some kind of an NFT dating game where we could like teach people how to be like less socially awkward and whatever. But where we ended up, because Adam was working on Pixel Mind, is we started running the pictures through the AI. And that was really neat experience because I had never been an AI generated artist before. And at first I was pissed because I like the faces, you know, Marguerite has been using this AI, and Marguerite is, first of all, a stunningly beautiful woman, right? But Marguerite also, I mean, I'm pretty, but Marguerite's like, well, you know, like Instagram girl, right? Like perfect little nose, perfect features, like everything looks so good. I have round features. Let me tell you, round features and AI don't go well together.
They don't go well together.
No, it works if you.
Funny,
if you
pixels and roundness don't work.
No, pixels and roundness are not your friend. And so I started getting these pictures, and some of them I look like a total monster, and then some of them were cool. But then I started thinking about it. I'm like, stop being so vain, Tatiana. You're like the Eve of AI. I'm the first. Nobody's looking if Eve is hot. You're just making sure that Eve is there at all, right? So I started to have a little bit of fun with it. And so we picked out some AI pieces that were like my favorite. And then, so as to ensure that graphic designers don't get lost and they don't lose a job, I brought in my graphic designer, and she kind of doctored up the pictures. She did like blends between the AI images and some of her own ideas. And so we had these kind of composite images, which allow me, because I always think of myself as a spokesperson for this technology, right? And so it allows me to kind of walk people through this journey of, don't worry, the Terminators are not going to take over. Artists are still going to have a job, and you can make this a multi-step process involving more people than you normally would. So for this, we started out with, you know, the photos, and then the AI, and then the graphic design, and then those are the album covers. But something that I'd really like to try out as I'm releasing the album is doing composite images, sort of like Mad Libs, right? Like I put in the first sentence, love is made of flowers, and you say, and cheesecake. And so now you get a cheesecake flower image, and now we've created something together. And now neither of us needs to have any artistic talent. And now we've got a co-created thing. And more importantly, neither of us, if I can't afford a graphic designer, I could still use the AI tool for minimal costs and I don't have to delay putting out my music because I don't have the perfect album cover where I look like perfect, you know, I mean, gosh, that's like a whole work in progress in itself. So with that AI, I think it allows you to kind of communicate with the artist better, interact with your fans, and I don't know, and like, again, try and be at the forefront of something that seems to be really taking off. Yeah. And seeing, you know, if I can help people learn about it through what I'm going through, then hopefully, you know, that brings more people into our little coven, our crypto coven.
It's awesome. And so when's the album? The album's coming out start of next year, right?
Yeah, so February 23rd is the official date, which I like that, to 23. I think that's the date that we're putting it out.
Nice.
But I've been putting it off, really, because, like, I don't know, I feel like I really want to have more money to put it out so it has more success, and I'm just trying to come to terms with the fact that, like, I don't have more money to make it a success, and therefore I need to accept that it's just going to go the way that it goes.
No, you need to get that TikTok working, man.
I'm on TikTok. It doesn't do anything. I have like 4 views on there. No one cares. That's why I was
funny. You know, you talk about marketing and marketing budgets and stuff. And like, I don't know, I was heavy into TikTok for a while. And so I still track it. And there was a funny one that came out. I mean, this woman had like a #1 song, and, you know, they had created brilliantly. She was doing a TikTok live, and people are typing in the TikTok as she's like playing around on her guitar playing. And somebody's like, she's like, come on, tell me a song ideas. And, you know, people start chatting, and one person's chats, I don't know, you know, eating grapes by the subway, whatever. And she makes this song like on the live. Turned out the whole thing was a fake. Like, she had already had the song was already produced, ready to go out. And the whole thing about the live and people typing in song ideas and stuff, all just BS.
That is
like, do something in live, and then a week later the song comes out, and here it is. And they created this entire hype cycle around, you know, and you look at that and you go, wow.
But I don't want to do that. And that is why I'm not successful. Like, what is going on? I have to make like a fake song in advance and like trick people? Like, this is terrible.
Yes, that's what you have to do.
All right.
Yeah, it's hard. Marketing is hard, as you know.
If I'd known this story in advance, I could have come up with one. You've been like, Tatiana, I'm not sure you're a really talented musician. Here's some weird words. Go. And
yeah, exactly. 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 And then people are like, oh my God, you're a genius. People love the idea of genius, don't they? They really do love this idea of like kiss from God, you know, magic striking, and people love that. But doing that artificially, I think, is hilarious. And maybe the way the world's, you know, moving.
But that's what makes me mad. I don't like, this is why I don't want to go out anymore, because everything's fake. Like, I can't go out to dinner without everybody taking pictures of the food. Like, nobody's ever seen a cheeseburger before. Like, they need to add another picture of French fries to the group. I mean, like, I don't know. The world is just an annoying place.
It is may you live in interesting times. It is fantastically.
Well, that's a sure thing. And I actually think that we're living through something really unique right now. I mean,
oh, totally.
I think about the people in World War II, right? They must have thought that they were seeing the end of the world, right? Like, especially after World War I, they're like, this again. So they had to have this feeling of utter despair. And I think that historically, people always have that moment in their generation where they're like, well, this is the end of humanity. I guess we're all toast. But now it really feels like that. Because of the ability to take over through the banking system, and realizing just how deeply corrupt the banking system is, it's just like, yeah, things could go full on 1984, Brave New World, like a combo special of like all your worst nightmares all in one. And plus more, you know, like,
maybe it's just because we're a little bit older, and you're a little bit older. I'm very old, and you just see it as like, this is your time to see the same thing that every other generation before you kind of had this same feeling, right? And so part of it,
I don't think they were right. I'm right. They were right. Letting you know.
Well, that's always the beauty of, like, you know, the human condition, right? That we think we are the ones, you know, we're the ones who really know.
Well, That's why I caved. I finally bought the Gulag Archipelago. I'm like bragging about it, like I accomplished something. I mean, like I bought it because
I've had that thing in my audiobook queue for quite some time. It's rough.
That's why I don't want to read it, but that's why I feel like I need to read it, because I need to transcend this idea of good and evil. It exists on one level, but like I don't get to choose the outcome and making peace with that. The spiritual journey continues.
The spiritual journey always continues. And I think actually the beauty of it is that we can all play our little part in making it better, right? And I think that's what you've done with, your idea of understanding this very early, what crypto can be. We're still decades away from it actually occurring, but the possibility is there. Right.
So by the time we're old, finally, we're going to get some street cred. Is that how it goes? Like when I'm like,
if we're lucky, from your mouth to God's ears. I mean, like, if it I wouldn't be surprised if it takes 30 years, or 40 years or whatever, or maybe never, but the possibility is there for individuals to make that choice. The possibility is there.
We're definitely
move the ball forward. Good on us,
Yeah, exactly. And we have to have a little bit of fun in the meantime, right? Like that's other
hopefully earning a little bit of money.
Yeah, exactly. Excellent. And no bugs. I will not eat the bugs. No matter what happens. Oh no. Awesome. All right. Well, this has been super fun. I'm so glad to have had a chance to chat through all this non-related crypto stuff, but still crypto stuff.
I love it. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Bye, everybody.